Today, we're talking about the UFO files the Pentagon recently released. They started releasing them back in May. 2 batches came out in May, another one in June, and the 4th batch just came out in July. As I'm recording this, there are already more than 300 files in the collection. They are posted on a US War Department website. The site includes a note saying the full archive contains at least tens of millions of records. So far, we've seen only a sample, just enough for the public. More will be released later. Most of these materials are basically internal paperwork, review logs, memos, and things like that. But there are also videos, photos, and PDF documents. That said, US officials have not concluded that any of these cases involve aliens. Trump, over on Truth Social, his own little app, posted that people can judge for themselves what they think actually happened. For a lot of people, whether aliens exist or not doesn't really matter, because it doesn't affect their daily lives. Still, plenty of people online keep talking about it. Take the official UFO website. When the May batch dropped, it reportedly got over 1.7 billion visits. If these videos had come out in 2010, they would have been huge news. But now that it's official, I kind of feel like it feels pretty normal. There's just so much of it that suddenly a few lights moving around in the sky don't feel all that unusual. They've released so many files. Maybe some of it's fake. We'll explain why later. First, the file names. From the naming alone, we can roughly tell which US agencies were involved with UAPs. Look at these file prefixes. These are all major US government agencies. Just from those names, you can tell the government had a lot of agencies involved in collecting and organizing UAP information, plus internal reports. The US government also reorganized the program several times. In 1947, it was Project Sign. In 1949, it became Project Grudge. Then in 1952, it was renamed Project Blue Book. More than 12,000 sightings were logged. But America's real motivation wasn't to go capture aliens or study UFOs for their own sake. That was only a secondary goal. The real concern was the Soviet Union. They worried the Soviets might secretly be developing supersonic weapons that looked exactly like UFOs. They even suspected those classic flying saucers might actually be Soviet technology. So the real question was whether these objects were made by the Soviets. They sometimes assumed it wasn't aliens at all, but the Soviet Union. So all those complicated naming systems weren't just random bureaucracy. They were scared seriously. They feared the Soviets using UFOs as cover. So the government felt it needed a standardized naming system to process huge numbers of UAP reports quickly. Inside this archive, there are documents, videos, PDFs, over 300 files in total. After going through them, I found the material incredibly broad and extremely fragmented. Some files aren't even about UAPs, but got included. For example, some cover spacecraft booster failures. Others are CIA reports on Soviet weapons test sites. There are even NASA reports on Project Mercury. Basically official scientific documents, but some material is directly UAP related. In this batch, the second release includes a notice sent by an astronomy club to its members. There are also reports from senior US intelligence officials, plus flight mission reports, and so on. Then there's this photo. This picture has already been discussed by lots of creators online. People claim it shows an alien, and looking at it, it really does resemble a tiny alien led by 2 humans. But this photo originally appeared in 1950 as an April Fool's joke in a magazine. It was a deliberately faked UFO picture. Surprisingly, the US government still included it in these files. That tells you something about how the US handled UAP reports back then. If it even seemed related, they collected it. Better a false lead than miss a real one. Material like this fills much of the archive, but it's mostly peripheral. Still, give them credit. The US government put serious effort into collecting and organizing records. That took serious work. There are 2 documents here worth discussing. First is this document series. This first series contains 233 case stories. It records early US Air Force cases from Project Sign and Project Grudge. That period came right after the famous Roswell UFO crash incident, within about the following 6 months. For every sighting, the files used a standardized checklist, including the exact time and location, the witness's name, occupation, how the object moved, its appearance, sounds, and more. The files contain lots of descriptions of UAP shapes, funnel-shaped objects shooting flames, giant fireballs, silver crescent-shaped objects, white cylinders, silver discs. Most were round or glowing cone-shaped objects and the like. The second set runs from Session 1 through Session 16. This series records cases from across the United States reported by pilots, scientists, police, ordinary people, and even children. These reports include plenty of dramatic details from civilians who said they saw UAPs. Looking at these two document series, you can see how UAPs became a social phenomenon in America. Starting in 1947, they entered the US government's information system. The military, FBI, scientists, magazines, journalists, and the public, everyone got pulled into it. Back then, almost any unexplained light in the sky could end up as a classified FBI file. By 1966, UFOs in America had become a business, a dinner table topic, and a uniquely American kind of public anxiety. Of course, there is valuable information too. For example, this file, DAO D28, is labeled China Sea, meaning waters east of China. But what it actually records is a UAP incident in the Middle East. It says that in September 2024, in Iraq, US, Special Operations Aircraft received orders to fire a missile at a ground target. Just after the missile launched, in a few seconds before impact, an unidentified object suddenly appeared at extremely high speed and shot straight across the aircraft's sensor view. Whoosh, just like that. The object gave off intense heat, creating a very strong flare on the aircraft's infrared targeting sensor, basically a bright lens bloom. It crossed the view without slowing or dodging. If it were any slower, the missile might have hit it instead of the intended target. Where were we yesterday? We were talking about a file from France. It records two very famous UAP stories. The first one. In 1976, over Tehran, Iran, a brightly glowing object suddenly appeared, a massive rectangular craft. There were lights flashing in the middle too. Doesn't that seem strange? Why would a UFO need flashing lights? To me, those flashing lights make it feel very human-made, like something deliberately designed to be seen. That's the impression I get. It caused widespread panic in the city, so the Iranian Air Force gave the order to send up a fighter and intercept it. As the fighter approached the huge rectangular craft at about 45 kilometers out, suddenly, every electronic instrument in the cockpit radar, intercom, everything including the radio, completely died. The pilot panicked and immediately turned back. But once he got away from the object, the radios and instruments came back online. So they sent up a second fighter. When it reached that same 45-kilometer boundary, the rectangular object started moving. It precisely controlled its distance from the jet. When the fighter moved forward, the object backed away, always holding that 45-kilometer gap. No idea why 45 kilometers mattered. Then, right at that moment, a smaller craft detached from the underside of the mothership and headed straight for the fighter. The pilot got nervous and reached for the firing controls, planning to launch a missile at the smaller craft. It looked like it was charging him aggressively. But the instant he pressed the trigger, his fire control system, radio, and flight electronics all failed again at once. With no other option, he had to roll the fighter downward to evade it. The smaller craft followed the jet for about 6 kilometers, then went back inside the rectangular mothership. That's one French case, and it's a famous UAP incident. The French report also includes a close encounter case involving alleged aliens at 6 a.m. On the 1st of July 1965, a farmer in France was heading out on his tractor. Suddenly, he heard an exhaust-like sound behind his house. He went around the stones and found, in the lavender field behind his home, a huge metallic flying saucer. It was about the size of a car. 6 supports were holding it off the ground. At first, he thought it was a thief, but when he got to within about 10 meters of the craft, he saw a small gray figure about 4 feet tall. Maybe he thought it was a child and wasn't afraid. Then the gray figure noticed him and reached into a bag. Yes, a shoulder bag. Maybe Chanel, Gucci, who knows? It pulled something out and pointed it at the farmer's stomach. Zap! The man instantly froze. Every muscle in his body became paralyzed. He couldn't move or speak, but his mind, his vision, and his breathing were completely normal. So he stood there like a statue, watching two gray beings, like a pressure point. Exactly like those old martial arts pressure point stories. He watched the two grays jump into the saucer. Then the craft lifted off and shot into the clouds until it disappeared. He stood there frozen for about 15 minutes, then moved again. Then it gets stranger. Investigators later found that along its first 100 meters, in a straight line, all the lavender had withered. And over the next several years, anything else planted in that soil would reportedly die within days. Stories like this remind me of those old books, Mysteries of the Unexplained. Those old mystery books. There were tons of stories like this. A whole patch of grass dies, crop circles show up, same idea. Maybe aliens are toxic, maybe it's radiation. And speaking of all this, even I thought some of these stories sounded ridiculous. But here's the twist. This was published as research in a legitimate journal. Actual research, you know? Next, let's look at this NASA file. Out of all the files released, through the fourth batch in July, this one still stands out as the biggest bombshell. It's NASA UAP D4. It's mainly an Apollo 11 mission report file. In it, the 3 astronauts reported to NASA officials 3 especially dramatic UAP incidents. Here's the first one. While Apollo 11 was flying to the moon, with roughly another day of travel ahead, the 3 astronauts looked outside and suddenly saw a huge, brightly reflecting physical object flying right alongside Apollo 11, matching its path. They immediately called Houston, the mission control center, thinking it might be a discarded rocket stage. But the ground control replied, "No way! That rocket stage is already about 10,000 kilometers away. That completely sued them." They were like, "Then what is this thing?" Armstrong described it this way. To the naked eye, it looked like an open suitcase, but after focusing a telescope, they were even more surprised. It appeared to be a hollow cylinder tumbling strangely through space, meaning that at certain angles, it looked hollow because the cylinder was hollow. Yeah, very strange. That was the first major UAP report. The second one, while they were traveling to the moon, while sleeping in the spacecraft, every time they closed their eyes, strange double flashes appeared every few minutes, along with random streaks of light. At first, they thought sunlight might be leaking in. Armstrong was skeptical too, so he ran an experiment. He sealed himself inside the cabin, made it completely dark, and sat there observing for a full hour. During that single hour, Armstrong recorded more than 50 internal flashes, almost one every minute. That suggested some kind of invisible high-energy particles were hitting the spacecraft almost like a laser, striking the metal hull. It was a little like an MRI, as if something was scanning the spacecraft's shell. It felt like something in the distance was scanning Apollo 11 from end to end, checking whether it was carrying anything dangerous as it left Earth. There was the second UAP incident. And this sounds credible, because the witnesses were Apollo astronauts, and the source is a NASA document. Then there's the third one. After Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit, Aldrin looked through the window and suddenly saw, on Earth's surface, a beam of light shooting upwards straight toward Apollo 11. Aldrin reportedly thought there might be a secret base on Earth using an extremely powerful laser to aim at Apollo. NASA's official explanation, however, was that it was simply sunlight reflecting off a lake. Aldrin supposedly believed that from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, an ordinary lake couldn't reflect light that brightly. He felt some hidden, mysterious force back on Earth was staring directly at Apollo 11, watching to see what humans were doing at the moon. I think maybe it was the underground people. Why release all these files now? What's the hidden motive? Maybe it's a distraction from recent military tensions involving Iran, or Trump fulfilling an old campaign promise. But I think what viewers really want is to believe these are genuine UFO records. Maybe America is psychologically preparing humanity, giving everyone a little preview so that if aliens eventually show up, the whole world won't panic. I've reviewed over 300. I used the AI to translate all of them and look through the images too. After finishing all that, my feeling is that these so-called UAPs could fall into a few different categories. First, patrol craft. Why call them patrol craft? That brings us to the Fermi paradox. Back in 1950, America's first major flying saucer craze was at its peak. Newspapers and magazines everywhere were talking about UFOs. The Roswell incident had happened in 1947 with claims of a recovered alien. Now it was 1950, so UFOs have been a huge topic for years. Naturally, Fermi was talking about it too. One day, Fermi was walking to lunch with several top physicists, chatting as they went. Once they sat down, during the meal, Fermi suddenly stopped eating and asked a question that would echo through science for decades: where is everybody? Because, by Fermi's reasoning, the Milky Way contains roughly 200 billion stars, and the universe is more than 13 billion years old. If a few Earth-like planets ever developed intelligent life, and a tiny fraction of those achieved interstellar travel, then even if they couldn't build science fiction light-speed ships and traveled at just 1% of light speed, any civilization would need only tens of millions of years to leave traces across the Milky Way. And compared with 13 billion years, tens of millions is practically nothing. So Fermi saw a huge contradiction in the probabilities. If alien civilizations are common, they should already be everywhere in the galaxy. But when we look at the universe, there are no clear signs of visiting spacecraft, and no obvious gigantic extraterrestrial engineering projects. The cosmos seems terrifyingly silent. So, where is everybody? To answer that question, many scientists and even science fiction writers came up with all kinds of wild hypotheses. The zoo hypothesis is one of them. It says humanity was never evolution's lucky winner, just the fifth crop in Earth's greenhouse. Those earlier mass extinctions weren't natural disasters at all, but periodic cleanups by an advanced civilization, resetting Earth for the next generation of species. If UAPs aren't alien exploration craft, but patrol vehicles used by a higher civilization, then all their seemingly impossible physics makes more sense. After all, those creators and human civilization might exist on another dimensional level. Second possibility, these UAPs are vehicles from an underground civilization. This inner Earth idea is actually mentioned in some of the released material. Remember that French Cometa report we discussed earlier? It suggests Earth's surface may once have hosted a civilization far older than ours and vastly more advanced. When some great catastrophe arrived, maybe they survived. Instead, they took their technology underground, or maybe they formed some kind of arrangement with the deep state on the surface. In that theory, UAPs are drones launched by underground humans, watching every major technological leap in our society. When Apollo 11 landed on the moon, maybe they watched it from below using some unknown technology. When humans invented atomic bombs, or faced a nuclear crisis, or went through geopolitical upheaval, they watched it all. Some people even speculate that COVID came from this underground civilization like a biological patch applied to humanity, meant to upgrade the human body. And speaking of system patches, there's another idea. Maybe our universe is just a simulation running on an advanced quantum computer. In that case, UAPs that ignore physics and jump across radar screens before suddenly vanishing aren't physical objects at all. They're cleanup processes running inside Earth's system. It's similar to what Elon Musk has talked about before, the simulation hypothesis. He has argued the odds our world is based reality are tiny. So when UAPs appear, maybe they're intervening around human nuclear tests, smoothing out physical bugs, and repairing glitches in the Earth system. In that view, they are simply artifacts left behind when civilization's program gets a live system update. To us, that might look like a light or glowing orb flying around. Fourth possibility, UAPs are overlap glitches between parallel worlds. According to parallel universe theories, our universe isn't the only one. Countless parallel universes could be stacked like sheets of paper, infinitely close together, yet never normally intersecting. So maybe some UAPs appear when two parallel universes briefly resonate across space-time, maybe because a nuclear blast creates a gravitational anomaly, or because of some other ultra-high energy event, that causes space itself to fold. What looks to us like a UFO or spacecraft might actually be, in another parallel world, a vehicle moving at high speed, or even an everyday object someone casually threw away. Because of a geometric fold in space, that object could briefly project into our space-time for a few minutes. That's why it's silent, why it's so fast, and seems to ignore inertia. Its physical frame and power source may not exist in our universe at all. At first, I say UAPs might not matter much to some people, right? But the existence of this topic does matter. Why did I say that? Because, in a sense, the UAP phenomenon may actually have helped save humanity. The idea that UAPs existed may have helped keep Earth from destroying itself. That brings us to the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, humanity went through the closest brush with all-out nuclear war in 13 terrifying days. The United States and Soviet Union nearly exchanged nuclear strikes. And that happened during a major wave of UAP interest. Everyone was talking about them. People suddenly began to imagine that beyond America and the Soviet Union, there might be another, more advanced civilization. And in the face of an unknown civilization, the US-Soviet Cold War could look like childish infighting among Earthlings. President John F. Kennedy once wrote in a memo. So when you combine these UAP files with the historical context of that period, you can see that this line becomes extremely important. Kennedy, of course, knew about the UFO issue. At the time, he had been involved in some UAP-related investigations, including efforts to collect this kind of information. At first, he may have thought these objects were Soviet aircraft, but later the thinking became, wait, maybe not. The Soviets hadn't built anything like this. And if it wasn't Soviet, then maybe something beyond us, a craft belonging to a civilization beyond Earth's own. That would mean realizing there might be another group above humanity entirely. Then, in 1971, the US and Soviet Union signed an agreement on measures to reduce the risk of outbreak of nuclear war. One provision explicitly said that if either side's missile warning system detected an unidentified object, notify the other side immediately. Don't mistake it for an enemy attack and launch a nuclear strike. Don't launch nukes over a false alarm. So, whether or not UAPs are actually alien spacecraft, we still have to recognize one thing. Humanity's awe and fascination with extraterrestrial civilization may have helped our world avoid destroying itself. Because faced with the vastness of the universe, humans finally had to recognize how small we are. There's also another theory that UAPs really were aliens. They saw the US and Soviet Union preparing for nuclear war and realized how serious it was, so they stepped in and interfered. After that intervention, both sides started getting scared. At the time, both the US and Soviet Union were competing to be the world's #1 superpower. Then suddenly, you find something else far more advanced than either side. Its craft can change direction instantly and seem to ignore inertia. Maybe both sides should team up and deal with the bigger mystery together, that unknown force. Stop fighting each other before the unknown thing deals with both of you. That's another way people interpret it. In that sense, the UAP phenomenon may even have helped push the two sides toward cooperation. Now look at it from another angle. If the US and Soviet Union had launched their nukes, Earth might have been finished. So maybe aliens sent a UAP here to interfere just enough to let Earth keep going. Almost like some higher civilization behind the scenes still wanted to keep watching humanity to see how we evolve, what we create, and how we live, and how our societies develop. So maybe Earth is one giant, universe-scale version of the Truman Show. Alright, that's it today. Next time, something else.